All right, guys, it is 11 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the Division of Drinking Water's monthly webinar for 30 minutes. And at the end of the webinar, we'll show you how to get CEUs for attending. There's a quiz that you can take. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Rachel Cassidy with the division, and my email's right there if you need to contact me. Before we get to our guest speaker, we have Michelle Deras here from Weber Basin to present to us on emergency sampling, which we're excited that she came. I'm just going to give you a couple minutes of some updates of things going on at division. Reminders, we have two trainings through the Rural Water Association this week, tomorrow and Wednesday on spring runoff training. And then to look at more upcoming training, I would recommend you check out the Rural Water website, rwau.net, for upcoming training as well. Seasonal startup procedures for total coliform rule and your sampling site plans for total coliform rule. Just a reminder that the sampling site plans are due by the end of September. Seasonal startup is due as you start your system. So, cool. Something.
That's all. You're gonna need to know that for your quiz question.
The last part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you need to know. It might be phrased incorrectly right now, but just know that the answer is there.
For your CEUs, for watching the webinar, pay attention to the second bullet. And we have had requests to talk more in depth about seasonal startup, who to talk to, what is required there, and we will we'll do that for sure as the next webinar, if not before. CCR's Consumer Confidence Report, those are due July 1st, and we are updating our website, so please keep checking drinkingwater.utah.gov. So I'm going to talk a little bit about chlorine residuals before we let Michelle take over. Chlorine residuals are required for all water systems who either purchase disinfected water or disinfect the water themselves. You can't see the rule, but this is the rule reference. It's R309-105-10. The requirement is we need a minimum of 12 chlorine residuals per month, which is 3 times a week, or at any time you take a coliform sample, the coliform sample should come to us with a chlorine residual. If, again, you purchase chlorinated water or you are chlorinating the water yourselves. What we need is we need the monthly average reported to us every quarter. So again, it's for systems that chlorinate or purchase chlorinated water. If you look at your inventory report on waterlink.utah.gov, you can see if you have a consecutive connection to a chlorinating system or an active chlorinator treatment plant on your inventory. That's really the only way right now that we show that requirement. So we're going to work on making it more obvious that this is a quarterly requirement. The requirement is to get these residuals, and in addition, the rule requires that you submit operational data to us. What that operational data is, it's just an Excel spreadsheet where you show the volume of water treated, the settings on your rotometer, or the pump, or the number of tablets that you're using. It's just, the requirement is here to make sure that you're checking your treatment process. The operational data is not required for systems who are purchasing and not chlorinating themselves, just the residuals if that's your type of system. So if you do not submit this information, it is 10 IPS demerit points for each month that we don't receive those residuals. And you can check your IPS report today. Those violations for the first quarter of 2017 have been added, and we will try to pare down that list and send out notices of violation in about a week and a half on those violations. So please just keep in mind, they're due at the end of every calendar quarter. The reason why we're talking so much about this lately is because we had the old way of doing it. It started in 2005. We had this gigantic Excel spreadsheet where systems were sending us DBP results, chlorine residuals, and operational information. And if you want to keep doing it the old way, that's great. Knock yourself out. But we are offering a new way of doing it. The new way is just having your lab submit the DBP results. Chlorine residuals, we have this online form that you can use to submit them. And then your operational information is on our website. There's a new form for that. You can use the new form or you can use the old form. but it's on our website under quick links on the main page. So here it is on the main page under quick links. This report distribution residuals online. This is where you can report that monthly average every quarter. You can do it every month if you want, or at least every quarter. And then this quarterly operational report for disinfecting systems. This is that Excel spreadsheet. If you have a chlorinator, if you're adding chlorine to the system, then we need this operational report every quarter as well. So I know we probably still have questions about that, but hopefully that maybe cleared it up a little. If you want to talk to me about it, I would suggest you go ahead and just shoot me an email, and we can talk over email and answer any of your questions that you may have. So at the end of this webinar, we'll talk about the next one and the CEU credit that you can get. But for now, I am going to transfer over to Michelle. We are so excited that Michelle's with Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District, and she is here to talk to us about emergency sampling.
Thanks, Rachel. So today I'm going to talk about emergency sampling, which hopefully no one will ever have to experience, but it is nice to kind of have an idea of some things to keep in mind. It's challenging to train for, but it would be great if you had some type of emergency response training, if you have any risk to your utility on how to conduct emergency sampling. And then I gave this presentation last year for an AWWA conference, so a few of you might have seen this already, but I also mentioned cyanotoxins, since that's kind of become a little more popular topic in Utah. Just a couple things on how you could potentially pull samples for that. I think I'm muting this.
There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Okay. So if you just click on that screen when it bounces.
Okay.
Sorry.
So water quality contamination emergency. So essentially there's two situations if you had a water quality emergency. One would be a contamination incident. In this situation, an incident is when the presence of a harmful contaminant has been confirmed. So essentially if a truck rolls over into your source, or you can see something in your water, that's a confirmed incident. Now, a contamination threat would either be a written, verbal, or observed incident that there has been a contamination threat, but there's no conclusive proof yet that there actually has been contamination. The probability of an actual contamination incident might be low, but the probability that a threat will occur can be high. So an example of a contamination incident. This would be a confirmed situation that you have a contaminant present in your drinking water. Unfortunately, this one is a man was identified in a drinking water tank, or you open the hatch to your tank and you can find something in the bottom, hopefully not alive, but essentially after you've even drained the tank, that would be an example of a confirmed incident of a contaminant. An environmental spill is a confirmed incident. You could have a rollover into your source, or like the infamous EPA spill where they discharged all that contaminant into the water. This would be another example of an incident where you could be at risk to contamination in your system. It doesn't look like the guy in that picture is having a very good day. I don't know who came up with the idea to light their water on fire, but this would be another example of a contamination incident. Methane gas in groundwater. A contamination threat, and many of you might have already come across something similar to this where it appears that someone might have pulled a prank or tried to get into your facility, but that would be an example of a contamination threat where you're not entirely sure if they did break in or what type of contaminant might have been added to the water. Bioterrorism, a contaminant threat. Somebody might call in and threaten that they have done something to the water. Essentially, if this happens, it would be good to try and ask a bunch of questions calmly. People could be just angry. I doubt if it's a legitimate threat, they're really going to call and let you know. But some of the things you can do is ask, what did you add? How much did you add? When did you add it? Who are you trying to target? Who are you mad at? Would you like me to find someone for you to talk to in case they're emotionally unstable and they're just looking for help? You can try this, but ask them what's the best way to get a hold of you and try and get their phone number or their Facebook page so that way you can track them down later. If they're going to give you that information, then I'm not sure how strong of a threat that is. Here's a huge list of bioterrorism agents that could be a potential threat to your system. You should have these memorized, check for them on a daily basis. Just kidding.
I was going to say, check for the plague. That's my favorite one.
Check for the plague. There's quite a bit of environmental or bioterrorism agents out there that the CDC considers a threat to your system. So your water facility might not be the target facility for a bioterrorism threat. If somebody's savvy enough, they might know that if they add the water to your facility and they're targeting a facility downstream from you, or they're just trying to target a mass populace, essentially those would be some of the reasons somebody, disgruntled employees, but a bioterrorism threat. Cyanotoxins, that's another one that's been discussed a lot more recently, whether or not that's a threat to your utility. Cyanotoxins are not regulated for drinking water. Will they be in the future? We're not sure, but that's a potential threat to your system if you have a cyanobacteria bloom in your source. So what do you do if you either have an incident or a threat that you're aware of? First thing I would do is shut it down. You need to try and stop the spread. So isolate your system and shut down any flow going to other areas. Keep in mind, if it's an incident that looks like somebody broke into your utility or has created an issue for you, you need to preserve the area. Don't go stomping around and then they can't figure out who had done that. It would potentially be a crime scene, so you need to preserve the scene. And if there's any hazardous materials on site, you need to be cautious of that. Call hazmat in. Who do you call? Well, sometimes you might want to call Ghostbusters if you're out there in the evening and you're looking around and you're not too sure what's going on. But 911 or dispatch, they could be the first people that you call. You might want to call your boss first, I guess, discuss it with him. And they will contact hazmat, sometimes the FBI or the EPA, to come on scene if it's an environmental spill or somebody has broken into your facility or a threat of a bioterrorism agent. Utah's Division of Drinking Water has a 24-hour emergency number for you to get a hold of them. If you're not sure what's happening, what potential contaminant is there, they can work with you on what to sample for, some of the assumptions and what type of constituents to look for. Your local health department might be good to reach out to them. Dispatch should have a 24-hour emergency number for that department, so you don't have to thumb through a phone book to look for it. And then any connected or consecutive systems. So if you're going to be offline while you're handling a threat, or that potential threat could be spread throughout your consecutive systems, you're going to want to give them a call and let them know what's going on. And any backup utilities. If you have the luxury to try and use a different source or a drinking water source from other utilities that they can supplement demand while you're offline, that would be great to reach out to them and let them know what's going on. So investigating the site. Like I mentioned earlier, do not disturb a crime scene. And essentially somebody breaking into your water tank to go for a skinny dip would be a crime scene. So you might want to be cautious about how you disturb that scene. If you're not sure what type of contaminant might be present, you might want to wait for a hazmat team to come in and investigate the site. Coordination. So hopefully this wouldn't be the case, but you might not be the first person on scene or notified if there's been some type of contamination threat or incident. Essentially that's more predominant in source water. If there's been some type of rollover or tanker truck spill into your source water that's about, upstream from your intake to your treatment plants, it would be good to coordinate with other essential entities like police, fire, hazmat. All these people might be on scene, EPA might be on scene, UDOT, the media. And then of course there's that one guy where everyone's in a hazmat suit except for him, which I find very interesting. It's important to let emergency responders know you are on scene and what your intent is. You're going to need to collect your own samples. You might have an emergency spill kit designed for certain spills to protect your source water, and you need to be able to sample and protect your utility regardless of whatever efforts they've been trained to use. It's great to coordinate with them. Safety and personal equipment. I know there's plenty of times that you jump in and grab that sample and you don't necessarily know what contaminant is in the water. So it's good to have at least some essential items on hand, gloves, maybe eye protection, clothing, waders, if you need to go in and collect that sample. Everyone likes to be a hero. So I like this picture a lot because his sample apparatus is an empty can, and jump in and grab that sample. I mean, realistically, sometimes your contaminant might be something that you see passing through your system very rapidly, and you need to catch that sample so that way you can figure out what had happened and what repercussions will be for that. And this leads into the next also, this slide where a sample is better than no sample. So if you don't have the proper sampling apparatus on hand, grab something that you think would be the least contaminated and grab that sample. I can't tell you how many times people brought me a sample in an empty Maverick cup. And if they ever asked me to check for total coliform or E. coli, I would suggest they go out and resample, because who knows what was happening in that cup prior. But Maverick cup seemed to be the sample apparatus of choice when somebody grabbed a water sample and brought it over to the lab. There is an EPA guide. I'm sure everyone's going to pick it up and read it. So that way it kind of tells you what type of sampling guidance you can have to look for contaminants in drinking water. If anything, just download it as a PDF and have it on hand, something that you plan to never look at in the future, hopefully. So, sample collection. The Utah State Lab does have an emergency sample kit for drinking water. If you reach out to them, essentially it would be too intensive for them to supply this to everyone. Keep in mind, reagents in the bottles do expire. That's why each kit should have an expiration date on it. But these emergency sampling kits will give you instructions on how to collect samples. A lot of these bottles can have the reagent in them, so you have to be careful not to displace that reagent when you do collect your sample. They can offer these kits. They prefer to offer them to larger utilities that make them available to anyone in that area that wants to use them, or you can reach out to them directly and ask for a kit. Just try and stay on top of your expiration date. They said they have a few kits available right now for any utility that might want to grab one. Documentation. So if you do have an incident or a threat, you're going to want to document everything possible. The date, the time, the source, the quantity. Division of Drinking Water is going to want to know, like, how much do you think is there? What CFS were you running at? What's the extent of that threat or contamination? And how far out has it gone? Let's look at things like color and odor. You can taste the water, you know, it just depends on how you're feeling that day. Exposure volumes, very important. If you were able to shut down your system or isolate the spread, knowing how much did actually or could have impacted your utility is good to know. And then if you want to see if anyone's really paying attention to what you're doing, write down what you ate for breakfast. See if somebody notices. Utility roles and responsibility. So what happens if you do have an incident or a threat? There's public notices, boil orders, warnings or advisories you can issue if it looks like somebody went for a skinny dip in your tank. Any chemical intrusions, you might want to post a do not ingest order, no contact order, or warning notice. All of these notices should be issued by the public water system based off of your data and events, and at the request of Division of Drinking Water or the Health Department. They can ask for you to post these notices until some of your samples come back and you get more data about what particular incident or threat occurred. It's always important to designate a public information officer or spokesperson. This is a person that you'd want to communicate with the public discuss what's happening, what progress you've made, and also to give the all clear. A lot of information that you don't want could get out there, or people can start discussing things that aren't really happening or what progress. Cyanotoxins, since I mentioned this one has been coming up more recently, if there is a bloom on your source and people are concerned about cyanotoxins in their water, there is a lab in Florida that can handle some cyanotoxin analysis. And recently, Utah Health Lab, or State Lab, is also set up to try and handle some of these toxin analysis. And I think Chemtech Ford is setting up to do that also. So there's local entities that you can collect the sample and bring them that sample so they can test it for toxins. Reach out to them, ask them how they would like you to collect that sample or what you might need. Then monitor. You're going to want to keep monitoring, see what impacts, what spread, what's happening to your water quality. Keep checking on what's happening in your system or any consecutive utility that you serve water to, and just monitor to make sure that either the contamination is gone or there aren't additional impacts to that contamination incident. And then when you're ready to sound the all clear, that's a good day. Your public information officer should be the person to discuss that. You don't want to sound the all clear prematurely or get people upset or excited, because that never happens. So let them know, inform the health department's Division of Drinking Water, let them know that you are in the clear and you're back to your water quality standards, and make sure you tell everybody. So if you have any questions about what to do in a contamination situation at your utility, contact Kim Dykes at the Division of Drinking Water. He, I think, holds the phone for the emergency response number. He will guide you through. He'll ask you to describe the incident, and he will guide you through with some of the best sample analysis to conduct based off of your incident or threat.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Yeah, definitely call Kim. Kim does have our emergency number. So in addition, since we have just like 8 more minutes, I'm still going to use that time really quick. And I'm going to piggyback on what Michelle was talking about. We have at the division a little bit, some information on specifically what you can sample for. These are just some of our recommendations. This is not required or anything, but if you call us and you have confirmed E. coli positive samples, that means you have, at one point in time of the month, you have positive total coliform, and at the other point in time, you had positive E. coli. These are the recommended analytes that we'll ask you to sample for. So obviously, if you have positive coliform samples and E. coli samples, we're going to have you sample for coliform. If you're a disinfecting system, we're going to want you to check your residual, make sure your disinfectant is running normally. And then also, it's important, or it can be helpful to check for turbidity. Tank intrusions, this is just kind of a basic list, but it definitely depends on each individual situation, what you have in the area of your tank. Chemical spills, obviously, you're going to sample for the specific chemical analyte group in question, along with the basic cheaper chemicals like turbidity, pH, and coliform's easy. We always have you sample for coliform during an emergency. And then if it's a backflow or potential cross connection, it's about the same as a chemical intrusion. So these are just kind of the basics. If you get a hold of us during an emergency, this is where we would start with recommending for sampling. And then when you notify the public, we've run into, these are just some lessons that I've learned. The first thing is, when you are going to notify the public, it's smart to Google search the keywords in your notice and see what pops up in that Google search, because you'd be surprised that most of the questions that come in over the telephone and email and Facebook and things are, well, I Googled this and Google said, you know, I'm going to die within 2 days. You're going to get that same response from most people. So before you put that notice out, definitely Google search the keywords in that notice, and you can address those potential questions in the notice that Google's going to give your residents. We learned that one the hard way, by the way. And then always in your notice, typically more information is always better than less. You're in control of the notice. Like Michelle mentioned, we want any sort of notice, public notice, to be from the water system. We would be in agreement, the division and the local county health department be in agreement about the notice and then work with the water system. But we want the notice to come specifically from the water system. So more information you can give about the situation, dates, times, when to expect an update is always important. You know, you want to say, we will update you in 6 hours. That way the public knows that you're working on it and you'll be back with them within that time frame. Or if it needs to be overnight, if samples are going to take 24 hours, tell the public this is going to take a while. 24 hours exactly. So be transparent, give as much information as you can, give the contact information, and definitely know when you don't know the answer. You know, we would get questions on public notices before about pets, specifically, you know, expensive pets that we wouldn't know the answer to, expensive fish, expensive horses. Defer to the experts in those fields, you know, veterinarians and so forth. So public notice can get a little bit tricky that way. By rule, all notices should be provided in English and in Spanish. And also by rule, social media is not an acceptable method for public notice when we're dealing with a quality compliance issue. But it's used, and everybody uses it. So use your PIO and their expertise, as Michelle was mentioning, and definitely use it. But we also require the electronic media such as TV and radio. And then if it's a what we call a tier 1 public notice, which is a boil order or a chemical spill or something that you were not able to isolate immediately, you do have a 24-hour period to use electronic media such as TV and radio. And if you have a question about how should I do a public notice, can I use this, that, or the other, always just call and ask us.
One note on the social media, this is cold, is that if you're going to put it out there, be prepared to answer questions. Like, don't just tweet out, we've had a do not use or boil order, and then never respond when someone says why. Like, if you're going to use social media, it's got to be a two-way street of communication. You can't just put it out there once and then walk away.
Yeah, that's bad form. Get a millennial.
Yeah. Get a millennial. You don't have one in your office, find one somewhere.
I know. Yeah, we've got a few. We'll loan them out to you. But yeah, it's a good point. Social media, everybody's using it, but just be aware that by rule we do need the electronic media. So like Michelle was saying, notify your emergency coordinators. They do have that reverse 911 in case you need to tell the residents, don't touch it, pack your bags and run. It's very handy.
And we have the ability to do that too with our auto dial. It's not a reverse 911, but if you have a list, we can do an auto dial too and push out email notifications if you have lists of consumers. Check
that out, you guys. We can help you.
We can.
I know. Crazy.
You can help spread fear and panic.
Exactly. Yeah, we're good at that. Excellent. Yeah, experts. And this is just talking about what Michelle did. Michelle was talking about for transient locations. If you have hotels, restaurants, work through the local health department on those because they are the regulator for those. But you want to make sure there's an easily viewed notice and that the management in charge is aware of the notice. And if it's an E. coli, you want to include. We have specific language about E. coli. That's actually very useful. Again, we're being somewhat helpful, and we'll get that information to you in case of a contamination event. And then again, just what has happened and what is being done. So I'm not going to go further into this presentation. I just wanted to give you kind of what the division can do in the event of a public notice. We do have kind of a menu list of orders. We have for a coliform event, we have a do not use order, boil advisory, boil warning. It's like going to a restaurant, you can pick from the menu. Each situation is so different, and we have to sit down and work with you to help decide what is the best notice for each situation. And that talks more about that. So since we're up against our time frame, I am going to show you where you can go to get your CEUs again. Okay, so I promised only 30 minutes, so I'm not going to take any more than what I said I'd take. Here is the link that you can go to get your CEUs. You just have to fill out this Google form and answer a couple of questions about the presentation today. And then our next 30-minute webinar is going to be on May 22nd on a Monday at 11 a.m. The topic is to be determined, but I think we're really gonna hit the seasonal startup procedures, and then we'll see. And also, I really want your recommendations. What do you want to hear about during these 30-minute webinars? What are the burning topics on your mind that you need the division to address?
Or do you have a presentation you'd be interested in sharing, maybe?
I know. We want you to come. You don't want to hear all the time from the division. We want to hear from the community. So don't be surprised if I'm sending you emails or calling you or hunting you down to see if you would like to participate in our monthly webinars. It's a great way to share information and not just get lectured to by the division. So you guys, we appreciate you attending. Definitely get your CEUs. This will be posted on the website so you can share it, and it will be able to be viewed as many times as you want. And then it's 0.05 CEUs for each webinar.
And when it's posted, we'll put a hyperlink to the CEU sheet. So if you have trouble logging in or don't want to deal with the screen capture of typing in that long URL, we'll put a hyperlink in there when the final version's uploaded. So you can go check it again. I got a lot of emails complaining about that. Oh, did you really?
Yeah. Okay. Colt's my millennial, you guys. He's going to take care of that for us.
I am not a millennial. I am too old to be a millennial.
Okay, you guys. Thank you. I know he's not. I'm just teasing.
He's young at heart.
Yeah.
That's not even true either.
You guys, thanks for attending our webinar, and we will see you next time, May 22nd, and let us know what topics you want to hear about in the future. Thanks.